We have a variety of NHL news to discuss today, including the NHL's announced the finalists for the Jack Adams Trophy for Coach of the Year. Speaking of coaches, the Columbus Blue Jackets have hired a new head coach, and we have some trade rumors focusing on Jack Eichel, as well as the Boston Bruins and the Colorado Avalanche. We'll discuss all the latest coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. Now, as I mentioned, we have a variety of things to talk about here today. We'll jump into the trade talk here momentarily, but first, a few other quick items. First up, the Columbus Blue Jackets made an announcement. Actually, this came late yesterday, that they've hired a new head coach, and Brad Larssen, who was an assistant coach under John Tortorella, and has been with the Blue Jackets organization for just shy of 7 years. So obviously, they decided to promote internally. They had a variety of other potential candidates they could have talked to that have a lot more NHL experience and have had a lot of success as well. So it makes me wonder the direction of this team. We know that the Blue Jackets are, obviously coming off a really disappointing season. They got a fairly high pick in the draft. Things didn't go well. They're expected to make some additional, moves this offseason. They have some decisions to make when it comes to goaltending. Obviously, they have a guy like Patrick Laine. You got to wonder about him, Max Domi, etc. So to me, I kind of wonder if this might signal the fact that they're going more towards a rebuild than a reset. Doesn't mean it's going to go a full-blown rebuild, but it just makes me wonder, given a rookie head coach, where the team finished so low in the standings, after having a guy like Tortorella there a long time, it's just a completely different direction. Obviously, the Jackets, like I said, they're picking high in the draft, plus they have 2 additional first-round picks this year. I just wonder what else they might do, and I wonder if we might see the Jackets go down the road of a rebuild here. Only time will tell as we get further into this offseason. Now, we also have the finalists for the Jack Adams Trophy for Head Coach of the Year. This year's finalists include Carolina Hurricanes head coach Rod Brind'Amour. We have Joe Quenneville, head coach of the Florida Panthers, as well as Dean Evason, the head coach of the Minnesota Wild. I think all 3 coaches had great years. Their teams all certainly exceeded expectations for the most part. I mean, we knew Carolina coming in was going to be a strong team again, but I think Brind'Amour took them even a step further. And the Minnesota Wild and Florida Panthers both had really strong turnaround seasons. So it's kind of weird how sometimes the voting goes on these. It's usually some of the teams that improved the most, especially if they had a coaching change. But there's some really good coaches that don't always get the recognition they need. Look at Peter DeBoer, the Vegas Golden Knights. This guy's had many teams to the conference finals and the Stanley Cup finals. Wins everywhere as he goes. Doesn't always get a lot of the recognition he deserves. Obviously a guy like Barry Trotz of the New York Islanders has his team in the Final Four here yet again. Again, another guy that doesn't always get all the recognition here. But still, the 3 guys that are nominated, they certainly well deserve it. It's just interesting to me how the ones voting do the voting every year. There's always a big turnaround story that's part of the equation here. I'm going to say likely Joel Quenneville gets the victory. That's my prediction. I think the Panthers probably improved the most out of all those teams, and if that's the road they're going, I'm going to say he probably got the most first place votes. So we'll see what happens when the awards are announced. Now, before we jump into the trade talk here today, I just want to take a quick moment and acknowledge our channel sponsor, Manscaped. Top Shelf Hockey is proud to be sponsored by Manscaped. Of course, with Manscaped, we have a special offer here for all Top Shelf Hockey viewers where you can get 20% off and free shipping on all orders at manscaped.com. Now, of course, Manscaped just launched a brand new Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, which is a fantastic product. They've taken the level up here even again with the skin-safe replaceable blades. It's waterproof, it's wireless charging, has a travel lock on it, as well as a nice light so you don't miss what you're doing. So certainly a terrific product. Now, many people associate Manscaped with their trimmers, which is certainly kind of their top product, but they do have a lot of other great options as well, including what they call the Weed Whacker, which is another trimmer for your ears and nose. And they have a variety of deodorants and sprays as well, which also keep you fresh and are terrific as well. So certainly Manscaped has a lot to offer, and we certainly highly recommend all of their products. So check out manscaped.com and use promo code TSH for 20% off and free shipping. All right, so thanks very much for watching that promotional video. Back into the content here. Now, we're going to analyze a few of these teams that just were eliminated, but first we do have some updates on the Jack Eichel situation. Now, of course, we know Eichel's a hot topic, somebody we're likely going to be talking about a fair bit here until a move is finally made sometime, likely, at least what we're predicting to be sometime in the next 4 to 6 weeks before we get to the point of the NHL draft. So right now we know that there's a variety of teams that have been rumored to be interested, but one thing that came as a little bit of a surprise that came out yesterday, and was again addressed on the latest 31 Thoughts podcast that came out today, was the Los Angeles Kings. Now, one of their Kings insiders, John Hoven of the Mayor's Manor, he insists, based on his sources, and he's very well connected to the LA Kings, that they are out on Jack Eichel. It sounded like there was interest before, but they are not going down that road. Now, many people figured they were indeed going down that route because, for one, they have such a deep prospect pool. They could put together probably the best package of just about anybody across the NHL. There's a few teams that come close, and it can be pretty much right there, but for the most part, the Kings are loaded on young talent, some of which are already on their roster, a lot of which is up and coming, that's recently drafted and not full-time NHLers here as of yet, and they still have a good share of draft picks, everything they can include. Like, they could put together a phenomenal offer. Now, if they were being insistent by the Sabres to include Quinton Byfield, I can understand why they might be hesitant to do so. Like I said before, I wonder if things are going to change here on Eichel when it comes to the injury. Like, obviously, we know that whoever acquires him is going to have to be okay with the surgery that he wants to do, where it's not a common and fairly new surgery. It hasn't been done on an NHL player before. I don't know what went wrong here. Not to say that they were definitely going to be the one to land Eichel, but surprisingly that we're this early in the process and already getting word that the Kings are out. Now, I wouldn't completely rule out the possibility of the Kings getting back in. You just never know. I mean, at this point, if it's a case of the Sabres insisting on Byfield and LA saying, no, we're not interested in doing that, so we're out, you never know. The price can change. Oftentimes you see a player that you know is going to be traded. The GM's trying to play hardball and get a certain offer, which I understand Adams is likely going to do for at least a little while there. And if those offers don't start to come to the level you expect, you may have to change your price if you really want to get that deal done. Otherwise, you end up hanging on to the player, and it could create a worse situation. And, Elliot Friedman's been reporting in the last few days here that he believes not only does Eichel want a fresh start, but that the Sabres are ready to move on and don't want to bring him back as well. So clearly there's intent there on both sides to make something happen. So for the Kings to be out of the equation this early on is somewhat surprising when you get the likes of Byfield and Turcotte, and you've got Gabe Vilardi and Samuel Fagemo and Jared Anderson-Dolan and all these other young players that would be of interest to a team like the Sabres. It just makes me wonder what went wrong, because there was reported interest before. But as I said, we have word from Elliot Friedman and others that the Kings are looking to add 2 top 6 forwards this offseason. So clearly, even though they have all those prospects, they want a few more players that can have an impact right now. So some of those prospects are likely going to be packaged up and traded to make that happen. We heard comments from Drew Doughty and some of his senior teammates on the Kings at the end of the season that they wanted help, and they wanted it to be players who could help immediately. So it's not going to be surprising to see the Kings be very busy this offseason. But if the price tag on Eichel's too high, or they deem the risk on the surgery too high, then obviously that's not going to be the landing spot for him. But they very well could be looking at his teammate in Sam Reinhart. Friedman's also acknowledged that Reinhart is also getting a lot of interest as well. So it'll be interesting to see where Sam Reinhart ends up. The price tag obviously won't be quite as high, but he's still a very interesting piece, a versatile player who could help many, many NHL teams. So I guess we're probably looking at more like right now the Rangers, the Wild, the Ducks are probably the top contenders for Eichel. At least that's just my opinion based on what I feel they can offer up. I know that we've heard of other teams as well being interested, like the Blues and the Flames. I just don't really see how they have the assets necessary to make that kind of acquisition. But as we get further into these playoffs and you analyze some of these other teams, you just never know who else is going to sneak up into the Eichel sweepstakes and become a relevant player. So we'll see what happens, but word is the Kings won't be the landing spot for Eichel this offseason. As I mentioned, we're going to take a look here at some Bruins and Avalanche notes. When teams get eliminated from the playoffs, they obviously go into full swing offseason mode. They have their exit meetings, and it does not take long usually for a lot of NHL insiders and reporters to get talking about what changes they're going to make, because you can see what went wrong in their playoff runs. For a lot of teams at least, some of it's more obvious than others, what they need to do. Now, in the case of the Boston Bruins, they have some interesting choices to make. They have a lot of guys on expiring deals that, we don't know if they're going to be back or not. You have the newly acquired Taylor Hall on an expiring contract. You've got longtime center iceman David Krejci. You've got longtime goaltender Tuukka Rask. And they have other deals to get done as well. They've got a fairly substantial RFA deal with a guy like Brandon Carlo to take care of as well this offseason. And there's a lot of talk of what's going to happen. Now, you cannot help but wonder if Tuukka Rask of the Bruins has played his last game. Now, I'm not saying that to be harsh on Rask. I think he gets more than his fair share of criticism. I don't really think that he deserves a lot of it. I think he's been a fantastic goalie for the Bees for a long time. Although I will agree to some extent that when it's mattered most, there's been some times that he just didn't come up as big as you'd expect or think he could have. But with all that being said, Tuukka Rask is not a young man anymore. He's getting up there when it comes to at least being a hockey player, and he's got a very big surgery coming up. We were already expecting to hear that Rask was battling through an injury, and we found out the details, and it's not good. To me, I'm extremely surprised that Rask was even playing, especially in this last series. In the last couple of games, I can't believe Bruce Cassidy did not go to Swayman more. I understand he doesn't have much experience, but you could tell that Rask was really laboring up there. His lateral movements were not good. He did really, if you think about what he was battling through, he did really, really well. Like, his stats were not that bad. And you can't blame Tuukka for the loss. I don't think that's a fair judgment at all. And even a comment that Rask made during his exit meetings here were basically saying that the Bruins fans have been somewhat spoiled by a lot of championships in that area. The Boston area is an extremely well between the Red Sox, but especially the Patriots. And like he said about the Patriots winning so much that fans almost looked at them that they have to be champions to be heroes. And if you're not a champion in your sport, then you're nothing. It's almost like it's one or the other. At least that's how a lot of those players feel. And I can understand the sentiment. That area has been, obviously very well spoiled when it comes to a lot of sports success, but their franchises are greatly managed. They've had a lot of success there, and even the Bruins included. But it's been a little while since this group has gotten a job done. It's been 10 years since they've gotten the Stanley Cup, which for a lot of teams isn't a big deal. But when you're in the Boston area, obviously, and you're used to seeing all these teams win, then that's what you want to see. Now, could Rask come back? It's probably doubtful. Or if he does, what kind of contract do you give this guy? They're not going to have a ton of cap space, so you have to factor that in. Secondly, he's having a substantial surgery. He's got a torn labrum in his hip. For a goaltender at to be in your mid-30s and have hip issues, it's not going to be easy to come back from. He's going to be out till January, February. He's probably looking at February before he could play an NHL game. So you got to get through October, November, December, January, February, like 4 to 5 months without him. So obviously you have Jeremy Swayman, who could be a good goalie and help your cap situation by being on an ELC. Maybe they bring back, either they bring back Halak on a short-term deal because he's also a UFA, or they go into the goalie market and bring in another veteran who could kind of offset things here and, take some of those games off of his plate. But if Rask can't go till then, somebody's going to be a placeholder for him. And even then, it's hard to predict. And the other factor to think about all this too is if he doesn't want to sign a contract, which we don't know yet until he's had his surgery and recovery's going. Once you sign into the NHL season, cap hit can be a little bit higher because it can be prorated out. Now, if he's looking for $5 or $6 million comparable to what he's making now, that's not really going to work for the Bruins in their cap situation for a guy who can only play a few months of the season and possibly the playoffs. So I don't know. To me, based on what we saw with Zdeno Chara and the team wanting to get younger, I will not be one bit surprised if they let Tuukka walk. Now, he was asked point blank if he doesn't get a contract offer from the Bruins, what happens? And he said that it's either the Bruins or nobody. He doesn't want to uproot his family. He's got young children in school. He's been there a long time. Has no intention of playing for another NHL team. So if the Bruins don't want to give him a contract, then he's not going to play, or he goes back and plays in Europe. He mentioned maybe playing in Finland, where he's from. He said he's part owner of a team over there, so maybe he goes there, or maybe he doesn't play. So we'll see what happens with Tuukka Rask, but it's debatable and likely that he could be done with the Bruins. And as far as the other guys here goes, I think there's a good chance Taylor Hall comes back. I'm going to say we're probably looking at a 3-year deal around $5 million. There's no way he's going to get paid more anywhere near the $8 million he made last year, especially when you've got Pasternak, Marchand, and Bergeron all making a fair bit less than that. So I'm going to say somewhere around that 5 range or slightly over 5 on a 3 to 4 year deal is likely what he's looking at. And I think the Bruins are interested in doing that. I really do. I mean, yes, the last little bit of the second round series, he wasn't great, but he had a really good end to the regular season, a decent first round. We would have liked to have seen that continue, but I do think overall, for him at least, it's probably the best situation he's been in a while, and I think preferably he would stay for that price tag. So time will tell if that gets done, and we're likely going to see the Bruins trade Jake DeBrusk. That's almost a given. Wouldn't be shocking if they move Nick Ritchie either. And Andre Kasha, who's an RFA, has been injured so much that it wouldn't be surprising if he's not tendered a qualifying offer. So all 3 of those guys very well could be gone from the Bruins. I think some of them could benefit from a fresh start. Ritchie maybe stays, but I'm not entirely convinced that they don't trade him too. So we will see what happens. Boston has a lot of work to do, a lot of tough decisions to make, and they're going to be a very interesting team to watch here in the offseason. Now, I also mentioned we also want to touch on the Avalanche. I know they just got beat out last night by the Golden Knights, but obviously they're a team that is going to be very interesting to watch as well. Now, some feel Jared Bednar's in trouble. He's going into the last year of his contract, and as much as he's done a good job, and the Colorado Avalanche have had a lot of success, they haven't gotten over that hump in the second round of the playoffs, and maybe Sakic and his management team will feel like they need somebody else behind the bench to get them over that hump. I don't know. Or if they address the roster construction, which I think is the bigger problem here, then maybe he stays. But either way, you don't want to be going into the last year of your contract not really knowing what the future holds. So that's a situation we have to watch. Either he's replaced or maybe he's extended. Maybe they let it ride out. We've seen more coaches do that this year too, which is not a normal thing that we see very much, but it is possible. It could happen in his scenario as well. But one of the big issues for the Avalanche was, for one, the secondary scoring wasn't good enough. Nazem Kadri couldn't play that whole series, so that was bad news to start. A guy like Donskoy didn't really show up. Burakovsky finally scored in Game 6, but before that, nothing. So a lot of their secondary scoring guys were either not available or not showing up. So you can say what you want about the top guys not getting it done, but when the top guys are struggling and they're shut down by really strong defensive lines, which is, hard to play against, you need your supporting cast to step up, and that didn't happen. The other thing I found was that the blue line got pushed around a little bit too much. Guys like Samuel Girard especially, who I feel is likely going to get moved, had a tough series, a tough game in Game 6. He is a very small, quick, mobile defenseman, good with the puck, but when it comes to blocking out the forwards in front of the net and boxing them out, he just struggles. And against the big, strong forwards, he just can't do it. And as much as they have a lot of skill and mobility on that back end, they need some size and some grit back there. They have a little bit of it with a guy like Ryan Graves. Obviously, they missed Eric Johnson in that respect. He could add a little bit of beef back there too. But they had other guys like Zadorov and Ian Cole, and they traded them. And to me, looking back, that's probably a mistake. Now, the only problem is you traded Zadorov for Saad, and Saad was a really good player for them. So, to some degree, I don't regret that trade. Although Saad likely doesn't return to the Avs, not that they wouldn't be interested, it just is going to be tough to get under contract here with their cap situation. The Avalanche have to extend Cale Makar. He's an RFA. That's going to be a monstrous contract. I would try to go 7-8 years with him because it's just going to cost you that much more later if you don't. It's going to be a huge deal. You have to extend Captain Gabriel Landeskog, who's a UFA. You don't want to lose him. He's going to be, a decent amount to stay there. And then, of course, you have your goaltender, Philip Grubauer, also a pending UFA. So they've got some money to spend. They don't have a ton of space. There's going to be some cap casualties. I think Saad's going to be one of them. And I think Samuel Girard is going to be another. Also, when it comes to the expansion draft, it makes a lot of sense. If you look at their breakdown of their roster construction, if they only go 7-3-1, which makes a lot of sense for them to do, then they're only going to protect likely Cale Makar. You have Devon Taves, who would be the second one, and then you have either Girard or Ryan Graves. You really don't want to lose either one of them. To me, the contract of Girard has another 6 years on it. He's only 23 years old. I don't think they have any issues trading Girard. So to me, that makes the most sense. Graves still gives you some size, and to me, that's likely where they're going to go. Like they showed here in the playoffs that he struggled. And, not to say that he's not a valuable guy back there, but you need a little bit more of a balance between mobility and size and strength back there. If you look at all the teams that are advancing, they've got big blue lines for the most part here. Look at Vegas's blue line, the Islanders' blue line, the Habs' blue line. Like their top 4 guys are all big, strong defensemen. Now, some of them can still be very offensive and be good on the mobility aspect of the game and can be a good puck mover, but you can still be big and strong too and do all that stuff. So they need more balance in that regard, in my opinion. And Girard, I think, is going to be the guy that goes to accomplish that. And we'll see what they do. But the Avalanche are going to be a team. It's going to be very interesting to watch here because they have so many big things coming up that need to be looked after and so many questions facing this franchise as they try to get over that hump and take the next step as closer to being a Stanley Cup champion. So let me know your thoughts down below in the comments and we'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with all the latest news on all 32 NHL teams. Thank you for watching, and I'll catch you next time.